So hi, I'm Lynn Kleinmeyer, and I'm joined by two of my amazing colleagues.
I'm Corey Rogers.
I am actually the amazing one, and I'm Mindy Kearney.
And the modest one.
Oh, shoot. Who couldn't get Facebook Live working again today? I tell ya, it's not my friend.
Yeah, it's the dark side. That's what we've decided today.
It is. So I will be moderating today. So this is about the last you'll see of me.
And we want to welcome in. It's our 4th week of Facebook Lives. Can you guys believe this? 4th week.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. It's really hard to believe. So we would love for you to tell us in the chat, say hi, maybe tell us your favorite Star Wars character movie. You know, we'll just really get in the, I don't know, words are hard. We'll get in the spirit of it, of May the 4th. There we go.
A little community building amongst our viewers tonight.
But more importantly, if you could tell us what your role is. So are you a classroom teacher in an elementary school? Are you an administrator? It helps us to know. And then please make sure that you are throwing your questions in the chat for us. We are going to talk about Google Sites as a home base today. So we'd love to hear, what are your questions about Google Sites? Also, how are you using it? So we know we're not the only ones with experience. We'd love to hear how teachers out there or administrators out there are using sites as a home base for online learning.
All right, so as we get started today, kind of thinking about each of our different videos, we've talked a little bit about our continuous learning plan that our digital learning team has created. And so Corey, I'm curious for you, kind of where do you feel like that fits, Google Sites fits in with our continuous learning plan?
Well, I think when we first started talking about this, immediately I thought of Google Sites as a home base. So it's a great place for you to get information up for families and students. I especially like sites because of it being accessible on mobile devices. So I think what we're hearing more and more is that families may have a device, but parents are working all the time, or the device families might have is one cell phone, a smartphone. And so what I like about sites is I think it's pretty versatile in that kids can be on a Chromebook, or they could be on the parent's phone or on an iPad, and they can access all that information.
Yeah, and kind of playing off of the versatility, I think the piece that I like about Google Sites is just how easily it works within the Google ecosystem, of how you can link in the things that you're creating with your students already, you know, docs, slides, etc., that it naturally and nicely integrates into your Google site.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we talked about that I really like about this is there isn't really a wall. So there isn't necessarily a need for password and login. I feel like we're a pretty tech savvy family, and that first week was real touch and go with all the logons and the passwords and figuring out where stuff was at. And so sites, families can bookmark it and it's there, and we're not having to worry about all that logon stuff. And so I think that's an advantage of using sites as well.
Yeah, and that ease of use, not only for your end users, your parents and your students, but also for teachers. I do not have a computer science background, and so designing websites is not necessarily my forte. So I really appreciate that it's super simple. It's easy to use.
Teach semester HTML to middle schoolers? You don't know all that stuff?
No, nope, not it. Yeah, that's not a language I speak fluently, and so I do appreciate the Google Sites. It's super easy to use, and it's clean. It looks really professional. It's just simple to use on that teacher site as well. So.
Well, and I think
and I know Annie's. So my daughter is an 8-year-old, and they primarily use Seesaw at that age because she's 2nd grade. But her teacher has already at this time too built a Google site that has just links to different places and resources, because in Seesaw things can get kind of lost. And so I know that then within Seesaw she put a link to her Google site, and the kids can go there and find different activities and stuff if they're looking for extra things, because they do have activities already built into Seesaw. But if the kids are looking for extra stuff to do, they can go to the Google site and have access to those different things too. So even for younger students, I see some great benefits for it. It helps teachers, I think, kind of organize things that might get lost in an LMS kind of sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's a great way to use it. Well, I think the last thing that Lynn and Mindy kind of pushed my thinking on too is that when we think a little further down the road, is that using sites is a great way for students to demonstrate their understanding and their knowledge, so they can use it as a portfolio. We're probably not going to talk a lot about that today, but thinking ahead as we start to actually deliver more content in this online learning environment, that's a great way for students to think about demonstrating learning and understanding. And that's what my students did when we coded in HTML. But they picked content that they were learning in a different class. And then part of their website development was planning ahead, but then showing what they knew, content from different class about that content. And then for me, it was, what do you understand about development and the language that we're using, kind of troubleshooting that. So
yeah.
And what I always started with students and when I work with teachers building sites is, I think the first thing you need to do is think ahead and do some planning. I love a flow chart because I'm a computer science person, but yeah, it's not
Mindy's face.
but whatever your system is, I think it's worth like 10 to 15 minutes or giving yourself a day to kind of think as you do other things, but planning ahead to think about, okay, what is the content I want to share? Who is my audience? And then what is that going to look like? So am I going to have a page for every grade level? I taught middle school STEM and computer science. So for me, I want a page for my 6th grade class, a page for my 7th grade class, a page for 8th grade, or you need to figure out what works for you. But I think it pays dividends to sit down, think that out, whether you sketch it on paper or you make a Google Slides, Mindy's favorite, and kind of plan all that out, whatever your process is, but give yourself time to think ahead. It's going to save you time in the long run, and it'll make it easier for your audience to navigate the content on your website.
So do we want to take a little tour of Google Sites, just for those who maybe aren't familiar? Mindy, as you've been kind of watching, is there anybody out there who is already using Google Sites? We'd love to hear from you.
So Carrie is with us again today, and she said that they've been using them as student portfolios. Mm-hmm. So and we love that idea. I think maybe we'll talk a little bit probably about that as we go a little bit, but
yeah, we will definitely throw that in. Oh, ladies, by any chance, are you seeing the window that I intended with my sites?
I am.
Okay, now you're no longer seeing my family. Okay, so first thing you do is going to navigate to sites. You can navigate there from your Drive, or you can go to sites.google.com. That's what I brought up. It's up to you how you navigate there. And then what you'll notice is, which some of our team was really excited about, I feel like this was last week, but it's all kind of a blur, is that templates are back. So there was a template gallery in sites. It kind of sunsetted or went away, and now it's back. So if you're making a new site, what you can do first is look at the template gallery, which I think is a great place to start, especially if you're new to this. I think this is a great place to start for student portfolios. In fact, there's a template for that so that kids don't have to start from scratch. And so what you can do is either start with a blank class or choose ones from education, whether that's a club or a class, however you're going to use this. But those templates I think are really nice. I'm going to go back because I have a demo site. And then that's what you can see here, all of those recent sites that you have. The other nice thing to know is that you can search your Google Drive for your sites. So if you're a person that uses that search feature in Drive a lot, that's what I do, then you can just search for the title of your site. When I had my STEM and computer science lab, it was 2 classrooms on the end of the building. I had a workshop with some power tools for kids to build. I had a computer lab room adjoined, and we called it Mrs. Rogers' Neighborhood because I was off at the end of the building all by myself. So I created this just like it would have been in my classroom in middle school. So I even wore a cardigan today. I've got it all together. Didn't put tennis shoes on, but
I appreciate your commitment to a theme. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's kind of running through our conversation today.
Between the Star Wars and the Mr. Rogers, we got it all. Okay, so here is my site. And so what I've done is I've already built pages with some navigation across the top. Like I said, I set this up like my class would have been. So I had a 6th grade elective I taught, and then some 7th and 8th grade electives that I taught. And then I think in this online environment, gosh, I think it goes back to Wong. That feels like a long time ago, but when you build those boards so students get a sense of who you are, I think having that on your website, a short about me, got a picture of my family, short blurb about who I am, especially as we go into next fall and thinking about getting to know our new students and having them get to know us. I think it's worth that time. And then as I scroll down my website, all I did was fill in the template here. I really didn't mess with it a lot. So I added some links. These would be general information that I always want there for students to be able to find. So it kind of gets me there. And then your navigation for editing and adding is on the right. So you're going to want to live over here. So the first thing that you might look at is a theme. So you can choose between these themes in here and choose some colors if you want to make sure this looks the way you want it to. And then across this menu at the top, we can start to add some pages. And then where it gets really fun is where we start to insert actual items like text and content and information from your drive. I'm curious if there's questions about specific things because there's so much here.
Not yet. We did have Robin say that she also has the 4-5 teachers are giving students the option to create their own sites too, as a way to show research learning that they've done. But no questions specific yet, but just some other good options.
Yeah. Well, I guess, go ahead, Lynn.
Well, I was just going to say, Corey, along that right-hand side, when you look at the content, if you would scroll for us and just kind of show us some of the options of things to insert. I have to say the first one there is one of my new favorite features, the collapsible text feature. Just because, you know, you've got a great start page, but, you know, when you start really building some content, it can get really, really, really long. And so I always think about, you know, like Finding Nemo, just keep scrolling, just keep scrolling. And so I love that Google Sites has added that feature to have that collapsible text so you can open up the portions of the page that you actually need in order to engage. And so I don't know if you have an example of what that might look like in your site that you could share.
I do. So I navigated over to just a demo page. So I made a page for each of the classes I would have taught. And then I made a sub page underneath that for each of the times I would have taught that as a middle school elective teacher. So 6th grade courses I would have taught by a quarter. So under first quarter, what I did was I added a heading with an image, and I used the insert from Drive to insert an example of like a syllabus or class information from a course that Mindy and our colleague Amber and I have taught. But then what I did below there is thinking about online learning, I'd want to start to organize things probably by the week to make it easier for students to navigate and find the information. And so what I did here with that collapsible text is you'll see there's an arrow to expand or collapse. So underneath that heading for week 1, I added in a link for Flipgrid response and then the slide deck, but this is where you could add lots of different information for students. Is there an article you want them to read? Is there a YouTube video that they could listen to with similar information to give them some choice in how they get that content? Do you have a slide deck with directions and links to maybe an activity that they're going to complete and submit to you so you can check for understanding? And then you know, what we're seeing a lot of teachers do with Flipgrids is that's how they're getting kids to connect for that social emotional piece. And so added in a link to that Flipgrid, but teachers could do whatever they want here. The nice part, I think, too, or at least what I like, is if I go over to the left-hand side, I can duplicate the section, so I don't have to start over. So if I come up with a format of how I'm going to share content with students and I can keep it consistent for them, I can duplicate that section and just update the links for content for the next week. I also think it helps kids to be able to navigate what that content is. If you can keep it as consistent as possible, they know what to expect. They kind of know what the workflow is, and then they can use all of their mental energy on the new content versus figuring out where all the things are at to navigate. And then what you can do is I can then collapse that menu. And so what it allows the user to do is to navigate the website, so it's not quite so much stuff. They can look at just the things that they need. So I agree with Lynn. I really like this. It's a newer feature to me. I really hadn't been in Sites for a while until we started talking about this. So there's lots of new things to explore in here.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reiterate two really important things that I think you talked about, Corey, is, kind of going back to that idea of planning and being intentional about the navigation of your site and thinking about your students and that consistency so that you're very consistent with the format, because like you said, it does help with that cognitive load of trying to find the resources, the material. And so that intentionality in your design is super important. And I think that's what I love about the collapsible text, is that it brings some of that intentionality to content delivery. We know that when giving instruction, that chunking is super important. Well, same thing with content delivery online. That ability to chunk the information into those manageable portions so that it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming, I think is a really, really valuable piece. So I think just reiterating those two pieces are huge, especially in the current situation that we're in.
Yeah. So another new thing, I'm going to try to segue.
Well, I was just going to ask, can you please share my other new favorite thing?
Yes. So the other thing that we're pretty excited about is you can put announcements, and you can do that across one page, or you can do that across your entire site. So at the top right-hand corner, if you go up to the settings gear, there's a menu on the left-hand side to navigate. And if we go to announcements banner, what you can do is toggle this on or off. So I got this ready to go and then I turned it off, which is kind of nice. So you could have this ready to go and then flip it on Monday morning or whenever you'd want families and students to see this. But I can turn this on. I can select a banner color. So my website is the digital learning green that some of us love and some of us don't love so much, but it's that bright green color. So I chose yellow because I think it'll stand out against there. And then I made an announcement. The other nice part with this is it also adds a button. So you can make an announcement, but then you can also direct your audience to a certain place on your website with more information. So for me, I am directing them to this, to my third quarter page with information. You can send them to a new tab. So if you were linking to a different website, you could do that. And then you can choose, is it visible on the home page only or on all pages? So I'll leave that there. And then when I close this dialog box, you'll notice that it floats across the top. And no matter where I go on my page, it's there. If I click that See Online Learning, it should take me to the third quarter page because that's where I had set that up to go. So I think it's a great way to kind of grab attention. Obviously, if you leave it on all the time, people are going to become numb to it. So you want to use it sparingly. But it is a really nice way to kind of direct people and let them know that there's something new or there's something they need to pay attention to. Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's such, once again, sage words of advice as far as using it with intentionality and making sure that you are being purposeful for the times that you actually use it and share it. I think the other, one other feature that I was kind of hoping that maybe you would share, we've talked a little bit about the ability to integrate the things that you're already doing within the Google ecosystem, but what if you're doing something that's maybe outside of? You mentioned Flipgrid, for example, but I know thinking through some of the other Facebook Live events that we've done, things like Wakelet and things like that, sharing how seamless it can be in integrating those things. Would you mind sharing that?
So I'm going to try. I'll be real transparent and say I've had a little bit of issues with the embed code, but Lynn's had success. So we just think it's a googly problem for Corey. But what I will show you is I have a Wakelet board open already. So I'm going to go over to that board. And what you can do, first of all, which I think is easier, is if you click the share button on your Wakelet board and get the link to share, keep in mind that I've already set up all my sharing settings in Wakelet so that it's public. You can go back and watch the Wakelet video. I think Mindy was part of that. You can go back and watch that one if you need more information about Wakelets. But so I'm grabbing the link to my board that's already public. Whoops. And then if I head back over here to my 7th and 8th grade STEM, and I go up here to embed under the insert tab, You can embed by the URL or by the embed code. So if I say by the URL and paste that in, I kind of let it load and it gives me these previews. I'm going to choose this one because I want it to be a little bit smaller. And then what you can see is that it embeds a link to my Wakelet right into my site, which I think is a nice way to curate resources for students, but then have them always coming to this home base of Google Sites, then we can send them out to other resources. It adds it in real quick. The other way that you can do that is if you go back to Wakelet, Corey moves all the menus out of the way so she can close things. If you go to the ... in Wakelet, you can grab the embed code. It's giving you HTML code. What Lynn and I were talking about earlier today is we really like how you can kind of choose what it looks like. And there's all these toggles, so I can include the cover image and it gives me a preview, or I can remove it. It just depends how much space you want this to take up on a web page. And then what I can do is copy the embed code. If I go back over to my site and I go back to embed again, this time I'm going to go over to where it says embed code and I'm going to paste in that embed code, click next. And mine doesn't do it, but what Lynn's does is it gives you a preview and it will embed it. I don't know if you want to show that or not, Lynn, but what it then does is embed that in. It's just a Corey problem, of course.
Well, hopefully it'll be working sometime soon. But it's one of those things where that ability to bring in some of the outside pieces and have that one-stop shop. Once again, it goes back to that landing page, having just a place where your students, but also your parents can be able to find these resources as well. Sometimes, depending upon what other landing page you might be using, you might only have student access to that. So I think the value add of sites is the fact that it can be outward facing to your parents as well. So I think that's a huge, huge benefit. And I think those embed codes, then that ability to link either by the URL or the embed code, is once again just making it seamless for everybody who's using it. So.
Well, and I think the other nice thing too is that as I update my Wakelet boards, I'm not having to go back to my site to update them. So they're automatically going to get updated. And so if you've got landing pages for kids with resources, it's a one place you need to make changes versus kind of like just like dominoes of needing to make changes as you update things. And so I think that streamlines the workflow for you as well. The other thing that Lynn mentioned was making sure that this is an advantage because families and students can see it, but you've got to make sure that you publish your site. And so if you go to the top right hand corner to that publish button, what you'll do is choose the web address. But what's really, really important, and I've had to support teachers along the way, is making sure that your permissions are set correctly. So right down here, you could miss it, but it says who can view my site. And so right now, only people that have a Grant Wood AEA email can view my site. And that's not my intention. As a teacher, I want to make sure that families can as well. So if I go to manage, just like you can do in a Google Doc or slides, what you want to make sure that you do is here where it says published anyone at Grant Wood, I want to change that so that anybody can find and view this one because I want it to be public facing. But you've got to make sure that you update those published settings so that your intended audience has access to your site. The other thing that's worth mentioning, I think, is that you make sure as you pull documents from your drive over onto your site and embed them that you also have checked the sharing permissions. I've also worked with some teachers before that forget. So maybe they used a Google Doc to make their daily schedule to share. And then when families get to the website, it'll say they don't have permission to view that doc that's embedded. And so that's another layer, is just making sure that all the permissions are set correctly so that the audience can see your document and so that you're not getting a bunch of inbox requests of people wanting access. So it'll save you time in the long run as well. It's just another thing, an added layer of just thinking about, okay, as I do this, who can see the doc, who can't? And then I think the last thing we want to make sure that we showed you, and we think is really important, is along the top here, if I go to preview, you can preview what the site is going to look like. But what I think is really exciting, and this has been here for a while, but what's exciting, especially in the current situation, is you can see what your website's going to look like on a mobile device as well. And so obviously I might want to change my title a little bit. That's a little messy. But then I can scroll through and I can get a sense of, if I have a student that only has access on a mobile device, what is this content going to look like for them? That's a lot of scrolling. So I might want to go back and rethink the content on that page. You can also see what it looks like on a tablet. And then we can go back to what it looks like on a large screen, meaning like Chromebook, laptop, whatever that device is going to look like for a student. And then when you're done, what you're able to do is come down to the menu here, and I can exit the preview and then go back into my editing mode. I feel like I did a lot of talking. Mindy, do we have any questions in the
Yes.
chat?
So Robin had a great question. I'm so glad that she asked it, because I feel like we hear this a lot. Is kind of just talking a little bit about Google Classroom and Google Sites, and what would be the benefit of Google Sites over something that Google Classroom has, or vice versa, or how do they meld together, or what are your recommendations as far as if you are setting up a home base, would you use Google Classroom? Would you use Google Sites? What do you think?
Well, for me, I think it goes back to your purpose and your audience. Because if, for example, you are trying to share things with both your students and your parents, I think that's where Sites maybe has the edge. Because within Google Classroom, yes, there's a parent portion where they can get an update, but they're not able to actually see, unless they're looking over their student's shoulder, they're not actually able to see the resources and things that are being shared. Versus in Sites, they can go and they can explore as well. So I think that's one advantage Sites would have, if part of your audience is also maybe parents.
And what I would say for me is, Classroom is what I would choose for students to be interacting with each other. So Lynn and I actually were part of the Google Classroom online outreach Facebook Live thing. No idea, a week or two ago, maybe. I know we did it. But so to me, Google Classroom is a great place to set up some questions for kids to be responding with each other. And it's a great way with workflow to push out copies of documents to students. So if I want them all to start from a template, but then fill that in with their own thinking or demonstration of their own learning, Classroom is a great way to do that. So for me, it comes back to who's my audience and what's the functionality. Sites, I think, is a great way to share information out without having kids submit information back to you necessarily. And so honestly, for me, I would probably use both in tandem with each other, because with Classroom, I can link kids to my site, and I can link information that I want to be public to families and students. But I want to be able to communicate both of those things. I think, especially for me as a parent of a middle school or an elementary school student, the communication from the teachers has been really important to our success. And so I think if you use Classroom and Sites together, you're really able to make sure you're supporting families and your students.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, because I think it's nice. I mean, we're always talking about as few clicks as possible, right? So if I can embed a Wakelet or or put my Flipgrid in or link all of that stuff, but it's all housed in the same place, that's really nice on a site. Because to me, Google Classroom still is kind of the push and pull of student work and the classroom procedures of things, and but that running them in tandem together is maybe the best way to go, just knowing that both of them have a different purpose, but that purpose can really be a dual of sorts that works really well to kind of streamline some things and keeping kids just in a couple places instead of darting from this tool to the next tool.
Well, and I think then a nice next step, if you're going to transition into using Sites as student portfolios, is then students can create a site that's forward facing to share out, but they can pull just those documents that you've had them work on in Classroom through the draft phase, get feedback from their classmates, and when they're ready to share them out public or forward facing, then they can pull those into their site. And so I think it's a nice way for you also to model for students, here's how I organize a site, here's how I communicate information. so that by the time they get to doing a portfolio, they've experienced it, they've seen what it looks like, and so they're more comfortable, hopefully, in sharing that information out. Any other questions in there, Mindy?
That was the last question that we had. So I think we can start rounding it up.
Yeah. Oh, here, let me go ahead and stop my share. There we go. And now we can see everybody. It's so nice.
So tomorrow we have Gina, Amber, and I are doing Immersive Reader at 10 a.m. And we on the team love Immersive Reader because we think it allows all different types of students with different learning needs to access the same content. And we really, really think it's something special. So we hope that you can join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then moving forward, our plan is that we're going to start staggering these out. So tomorrow's will be the last one for the week. And we will have some the following week. So keep watching our Facebook page for updates on when those next Facebook Lives will be coming out.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, make sure if you have questions, if you're watching this later, add them in the comments and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. Have a great day.
Yep.
All right.
May the force be with you, everybody.
May the force be with you.